Hey guys, Ted here, and today we are doing something a little different. We are doing what if video game characters got charged for their crimes, where we are going to be looking at the various crimes committed by various video game characters and figure out what their real life prison sentence would be. What? Mousesate's extremely successful video series doing something similar with animated movie villains? Never heard of it. This is completely original and not inspired by anything I've seen online. So anyway, continuing with this very original idea that's never been done before, we're going to be looking at various Nintendo characters and trying to figure what they'd be looking at for prison sentences if they are actually charged for the crimes they commit in their game. Now, originally I was going to do this for a ton of different video games from a ton of different producers and studios, but this turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, so I decided to stick only to Nintendo. But if this does well, I would love to do this for other franchises and other companies. I am particularly interested in the legality of injecting people with praying mantis DNA and firing a beam at them to turn their blood into gasoline, so I might be doing a specific robot and a specific corrupt business CEO from a certain Valve property in the future. So anyway, let's start off with a few clarifications. 1. Canon only. We are only looking at main series installments or other installments that would count towards canon. So, for instance, when we get to Ganon, we are not counting anything from the CDI games or the TV show, and thank goodness. I don't want to acknowledge that exists again. However, we are going to be considering media outside of video games that also counts towards canon. For instance, I am going to be counting the Metroid manga that was a prequel to the original game, because that is actually, as far as I'm aware, canon, so I am counting that. We are also going to be counting guidebooks for the most part as canon unless something gets contradicted later, because a lot of older games especially don't give you a lot of context for stuff that happens in the games, so you kind of need to look to guidebooks for stuff like that. So guidebooks and manuals will be considered canon unless contradicted elsewhere. Now, to clarify, I'm going to be using United States laws because I'm a freedom-fearing, God-loving American, and I am too free to care about anywhere else in the world.
America, fuck yeah! Coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah! America, fuck yeah!
Now, the United States is strange in that all of the different states have different laws and very different punishments for those laws. Because of this, I'm going to be taking about 10 different states from different geographical locations and different political leanings and also just different beliefs in general. And I'm going to be taking all those, finding the average sentence for those, and then averaging out all the sentences across those states to give me a rough estimate for the average in the United States for that crime. So with that said, let's get into this. Now, let's start off with arguably the most famous video game antagonist ever, Bowser from Super Mario Bros. Starting off with the most obvious crime he's committed, kidnapping. Now, across all of the canon appearances he's made, Bowser has committed 19 counts of kidnapping. He has kidnapped Princess Peach in Super Mario Bros. 1, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, New Super Mario Bros. 1, New Super Mario Bros. 2, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, New Super Mario Bros. U. No, I am not counting New Super Luigi U, and New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which sounds like a Street Fighter title at this point. Namely because these are just re-releases of New Super Mario Bros. U, and are the exact same game. Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Super Mario 3D Land, and Super Mario Odyssey. He has also kidnapped the fairies in Super Mario 3D World. Now, kidnapping varies on sentence, but on average it's about 10 years, so Bowser is already looking at 190 years in jail. Next up, we have grand larceny. Now, Bowser is guilty of 2 accounts of this, stealing the scepters in Super Mario Bros. 3, and going on a massive stealing spree in Super Mario Odyssey. Now, grand larceny varies quite a bit in the United States as far as sentencing. ranging from as little as 1 year in jail in California, all the way up to 30 years in jail in Florida. Now, averaging it out, it comes to about 8 years in prison and $25,000 in fines. With 2 accounts, Bowser's looking at 16 years in prison and $50,000 in fines. Next up, we have breaking and entering. Now, Bowser has surprisingly committed this on screen only once. We don't actually see how he kidnapped Princess Peach in Super Mario Bros., and in most subsequent games, the Koopalings or Bowser Jr.'s were the ones actually doing the breaking and entering. This leaves only Super Mario 64 where he breaks and enters into Peach's castle. Now, in the United States, the average charge for breaking and entering is 6 months, so Bowser has another half a year added to his total so far. Next up, we have destruction of property. Now, it's pretty much impossible to tally up all the damage to property caused by Bowser across the Mario series, so we're going to treat destruction caused in each game as one charge of felony destruction of property. Now, felony destruction of property carries an average of 6 years and $6,500 in fines. Bowser has been the villain of 24 Mario games, so that's an additional 144 years and $156,000 in fines. Next up, we have child endangerment. Now, Bowser has had his children fight Mario and Luigi in a lot of games, and yes, I am counting the Koopalings as his children. It says so in the manual for Super Mario Bros. 3, in both the English and Japanese versions. And Shigeru Miyamoto might have said something different from that recently, but Shigeru Miyamoto is starting to slowly lose his mind, I think, if you actually look at what he's been saying, so I'm just going with the manual. Now, across the Mario series, Mario fights the Koopalings and Bowser Jr. a staggering 41 times, meaning Bowser has a whopping 41 charges of child endangerment. Now, the average max sentence for child endangerment in the United States, and I'd say this definitely qualifies for the maximum considering these result in injury and were potentially fatal, is 2 years and $10,000 in fines. So Bowser is looking at 81 years in jail and $410,000 in fines. And it should go without saying, he loses custody of his children. Next up, we have assault with a deadly weapon. Now, Bowser has committed this 17 times. Once in Super Mario Bros., once in Super Mario 3, once in Super Mario World, 3 times in Super Mario 64, once in Super Mario Sunshine, once in Super Mario Galaxy, once in Super Mario Galaxy 2, twice in New Super Mario Bros., once in New Super Mario Bros. 2, once in Super Mario Bros. Wii, once in Super Mario Bros. U, 3 times in Super Mario 3D Land, 3 times in Super Mario 3D World, and 3 times in Super Mario Odyssey, totaling to a staggering 17 charges of assault with a deadly weapon. No, I'm not counting any instances of dry Bowser, since whether or not he's really Bowser, and if he's mentally the same being, or if he's just like some undead creature, is dubious, so I'm giving him a pass. Now, assault with a deadly weapon carries an average sentence in the United States of 10 years, meaning we're adding another 170 years on Bowser's sentence. Next up, we have attempted murder. Now, every instance of assault Bowser has committed was with intent to kill, so he gets another 17 charges of attempted murder. Now, attempted murder varies a lot, ranging from a few years to life, but since he's attempted this 17 times, he's getting the higher end of the sentencing, which on average is about 10 years. So we're adding another 170 years to Bowser's total. Next up, we have mass murder and potential genocide. Now, in the manual for Super Mario Bros. 1, it says Bowser turned the Toads into bricks, blocks, and similar items. Now, it does say in the state manual that Princess Peach has the ability to undo this, but there is a problem.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Now, Mario is also at fault here, but since he's not on trial right now, and there have already been 1,000 videos talking about how horrible of a person Mario is, we're just going to overlook this right now and focus on Bowser. All that matters for today's purposes is Bowser turned the Toads into blocks and presumably a lot of them died in the state. From this can be considered mass murder and potentially genocide at this point. Probably even a war crime. Now, he's looking at either life in jail or the death penalty. And since there have been a lot of real terrorists and serial killers that have received the death penalty in the United States with significantly lower body counts, he's getting the death penalty. Bowser is getting the death penalty. I did not expect to have to say that today. Next up, we have terrorism. Bowser's actions in Super Mario Bros. 1, 3, Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, New Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2, Wii and U, Super Mario 3D Land, and Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Super Mario Odyssey, all counts terrorism. Giving Bowser 14 accounts of terrorism. Now, terrorism is a federal crime, so he's under the jurisdiction of the federal courts, and normal punishment for terrorism in the United States is either a life sentence or a death penalty. Now, since these are pretty minor instances of terrorism, and with the exception of Mario Bros. 1, I don't think anyone actually died, so I'm giving him life sentences, so 14 life sentences. Finally, Bowser has committed one war crime. In Super Mario Bros. 1, intentional directing attacks at the civilian population, which can carry the death sentence. So, in total, Bowser is looking at 2 death penalties, 32 life sentences, 602.5 years in jail, $206,000 in fines, and he loses custody of his children. Next up, we have King Boo. Now, like Bowser, the most obvious charge against him is kidnapping, having imprisoned Mario in a painting in Luigi's Mansion, and trapping Mario, Peach, Egad, and 3 Toads in paintings in Luigi's Mansion 3. The average sentence for kidnapping in the United States is about 10 years, so King Boo is already looking at 70 years in jail. Next, we have assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. King Boo has attacked Mario or Luigi with intent to kill in 5 different instances. In Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario 64 DS, which I am counting, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and Luigi's Mansion 3. So that's 5 accounts of assault with deadly weapon and 5 counts of attempted murder. Each with an average sentence of about 10 years, so that's 100 years, meaning King Boo is looking at, in total, for all his crimes, 170 years in prison. Next up, we have Donkey Kong. Now, to clarify, I'm only looking at Donkey Kong from the original arcade game, who would later be known as Cranky Kong. Not his son, Donkey Kong Jr., or his grandson, Donkey Kong III, who is the protagonist for the Donkey Kong Country series. Now, like the last character, Donkey Kong is best known for kidnapping. Kidnapping Pauline in Donkey Kong arcade game. Now, as we've already established, this is a 10-year sentence. Next up, we have attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. In the arcade game, Donkey Kong throws barrels, which would constitute a deadly weapon, at Mario, trying to kill him. As we've established, both of these charges have an average sentence in the United States of about 10 years, meaning Donkey Kong is looking at 30 years in prison, or I guess in his case, the zoo, since I don't really think you can put a monkey in prison. Next up, we have Ganon/Ganondorf, and this is where things really start to heat up. Ganon is one of the most evil characters Nintendo has ever created, being the spawn of his universe's equivalent of the devil. Now, before we start, I want to clarify, even though Ganon/Ganondorf has many different incarnations and has appeared in different timelines, for the sake of this video not being longer than it needs to be, I am counting every version of Ganon as one individual. Anyway, first off, we have kidnapping. Starting to sense a theme here, Nintendo. He kidnapped Zelda at the end of Ocarina of Time. He kidnapped Zelda along with 3 other girls who thought might be Zelda in Wind Waker. He kidnapped Zelda twice, along with the 6 other descendants of the sages in A Link to the Past. He kidnapped Zelda at the end of the original Legend of Zelda, totaling to 14 instances of kidnapping, which, as we've established, carries an average sentence of about 10 years, meaning Ganon is already looking at 140 years in jail. Next, we have grand larceny. Ganondorf has committed this 5 times, steering the Triforce of Power both during Ocarina of Time and prior to the events of the original Legend of Zelda. He also has the Triforce of Power during his attempted execution prior to Twilight Princess, so we can assume he stole it, since at that point it should have been in the Sacred Realm with the other 2 pieces of the Triforce, since as we've established, since in Twilight Princess's timeline, the events of Ocarina of Time wouldn't have happened, meaning he had to have stolen it again. He stole the Darkness Trident from the Pyramid of Power in Four Swords Adventure, and he stole the Sacred Stone in the past of Tears of the Kingdom, totaling to 5 accounts of grand larceny. As we've established, grand larceny has an average sentence in the United States of about 8 years, plus $25,000 in fines. So Ganon is already looking at another 40 years in jail and $125,000 in fines. Next up, we have destruction of property when he destroys the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom. As we established, felony destruction of property, and since this is a priceless, millennium-old artifact, I'm counting it as felony destruction of property, is 6 years and $6,500 in fines. Next up, we have assault with a deadly weapon. Now, Ganon has committed this 30 times. Assaulting Link twice in Ocarina of Time, once in Wind Waker, once in Twilight Princess, once in Four Swords Adventure, 3 times in A Link to the Past, twice as Agahim, and then once in his true form, once in the original Legend of Zelda, 5 times in Breath of the Wild, 4 times in the form of one of the Blight Ganons, and then once in his Calamity form. And then twice in Tears of the Kingdom, once at the beginning of the game, and then once again at the end of the game. It's worth noting that Ganon has also attacked Link at the end of the joint Oracle games, but the Twin Rovers messed up the resurrection ritual to revive him, and he was revived as a mindless beast, so he's not of sound mind during these games, so it does not count as attempted murder. He's tried to kill Zelda in Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, and 3 times in Tears of the Kingdom. Once during the opening, after he obtained the Secret Stone, and during the battle between him and the Ancient Sages. He's also tried to kill Midna and the 6 other sages from the past Tears of the Kingdom, and during his execution in Twilight Princess, after he broke free and killed one of the sages, he tried to kill the others, so that's another charge. As we've already established, on average in the United States, assault with a deadly weapon carries a 10-year prison sentence, so we have 300 years. Next up, we have attempted murder. Each of the instances of assault that we've already discussed also count as attempted murder, so we already have 29 charges of attempted murder. Plus, he also tried to poison Jabu Jabu in Ocarina of Time, who I am counting as sentient because his descendant, Jaboon, is shown to be capable of speech, and therefore I'm counting both of them as sentient. He also tried to kill the Great Deku Tree in Tears of the Kingdom. So that's another attempted, meaning Ganon's looking at a total of 32 charges of attempted murder. And as we've established, attempted murder in the United States carries an average sentence of about 10 years. So Ganon is looking at an additional 320 years in prison. Next up, we have murder. Now, within the Legend of Zelda series, Ganon has directly killed 9 people. In the Downfall timeline, at the end of Ocarina of Time, he killed Link and Zelda to obtain their pieces of the Triforce. He killed the 4 champions 100 years prior to the events of Breath of the Wild. During his execution prior to Twilight Princess, he killed one of the sages, and he killed the Great Deku Tree in Ocarina of Time. And yes, this is murder, not murder by proxy. Some people might argue it's murder by proxy because he didn't technically kill the Great Deku Tree, Goma did. But Goma was essentially acting as a poison, so this counts as murder. And finally, he killed Sonya in the past of Tears of the Kingdom. Now, as you're probably aware, murder is a life sentence across all of the United States, so he is looking at 9 life sentences. Next up, we have attempted murder by proxy. Now, Ganon has done this 10 times. In Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Four Swords Adventure, and Tears of the Kingdom, he summons Phantom Ganon to fight Link. In Twilight Princess, he has Zant try to kill Midna. Prior to the events of Breath of the Wild, he tries to kill Zelda with a Guardian. In Tears of the Kingdom, he tries to kill Roru with a Molduga Stampede, and later summons monsters at each of the dungeons to try to kill Link. Now, you're probably wondering why Phantom Ganon and the Tears of the Kingdom bosses count as murder by proxy, but the other bosses do not. That's because other bosses are either acting of their own volition without instruction from Ganon, and or were created specifically to guard a location or item. And that's perfectly legal. All he's doing is leaving a giant snake or spider or whatever in a room, and it's Link's fault for going in there. However, with Phantom Ganons and Tears of the Kingdom bosses, he summons them in response to Link showing up, which he may or may not have lured him into anyway, and he summons them in response, meaning this falls under attempted murder by proxy. Now, in many states, attempted murder by proxy and murder by proxy are counted as attempted murder and murder. So Ganon is looking at another 120 years in prison. Next up, we have murder by proxy. Ganon has committed this 3 times. Having the Guardians kill Link in the past of Breath of the Wild, and yes, Link does get resurrected, but he still killed him, so this still counts as murder. And having his minions kill the sages in the past of Wind Waker. So this adds another 3 life sentences to Ganon's total. Next up, we have perjury. Now, Ganon has disguised himself as Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, that's federal perjury, so it's punishable by 5 years in prison. Next up, we have lying under oath. Ganon has committed this 2 times, swearing false fealty to the King of Hyrule in Ocarina of Time and to Woru in the ancient past of Tears of the Kingdom. Now, at the federal level, lying under oath carries a sentence of 5 years, so add on another 10 years to his sentence. Next, we have high treason. Now, Ganon has committed this 4 times, betraying the Kingdom of Hyrule and Ocarina of Time in the past of Twilight Princess, which leads to his execution, in Four Swords Adventure, and in the ancient past of Tears of the Kingdom. Now, in the United States, high treason can land you a death penalty, and I say waging war on your country and murdering the royal family and attempting to kill all its inhabitants warrants death penalty. So that's 4 death penalties. Next up, we have genocide. In Ocarina of Time, Ganon planned to use Volvagia to wipe out the Gorons. In Breath of the Wild, he almost wiped out all of Hyrule, and in the past Tears of the Kingdom, he waged war on Hyrule, intending, in his own words, to leave no survivors. These are crimes against humanity, or I guess in this case, crimes against sentient life, so he can definitely get the death penalty for all 3 of those, adding 3 more death sentences to his total. Next up, we have terrorism. Great, I am definitely getting on some sort of watch list for researching this one. Anyway, Ganon has committed a lot of acts of terrorism, such as destroying Castle Town twice, once in Ocarina of Time, then again in Breath of the Wild. Now, in Twilight Princess, we do see that the old Castle Town was destroyed. Now, this very well could have been Ganon, but we don't know, so I'm just not going to count it. But this very well could have been Ganon, but I'm not counting it. He unleashed his army on Hyrule Castle in the past of Wind Waker. He shrouded land in Twilight and turned the inhabitants into spirits in Twilight Princess. In the original Legend of Zelda and the ancient past of Tears of the Kingdom, he invaded Hyrule with an army of monsters, totaling to 6 accounts of terrorism. Now, terrorism can land you any number of years in prison, but acts of terrorism that result in 1 or more deaths can get you the death penalty. So in total, Ganon is looking at 6 death penalties for terrorism, and I'm looking at getting put on a watch list for researching this stuff. Anyway, next up we have, oh great, war crimes. Now I'm definitely getting put on a watch list. Anyway, this is going to be a particularly long segment because, as we established, Ganon is evil incarnate, but also because war crimes are depicted shockingly frequently in media. I mean, just count how many war crimes appear in Star Wars. I'm looking at you, Chopper, you psychopath. Anyway, back on track. First, we have 2 instances of biological warfare, with him trying to poison Jabu Jabu and the Great Deku Tree. Next up, we have his actions towards the Goron and Zora in the adult portion of Ocarina of Time, which both fall under intentionally directing attacks at the civilian population. Then we have his destruction of Hyrule Castle Town in Ocarina of Time, which falls under excessive destruction of property and indiscriminate attack. Then in Twilight Princess, we have 2 separate instances of him compelling prisoner of war to serve in the forces of a hostile power. First, when he turned the Twilight into Shadow Beasts, and secondly, when he possessed Zelda to fight Link. I'm not counting any of the stuff Zant did, since it's not clear how much direct involvement Ganondorf had with what Zant was doing. It's hard to say what Ganondorf ordered Zant to do and what Zant was doing of his own volition, so I'm not counting any of it. Next, we have A Link to the Past, where he mind-controlled the soldiers of Hyrule This would also fall under forcing a prisoner of war to fight in the forces of a hostile power. Then, in the original Legend of Zelda, we have plundering when he stole a Triforce from a city in Lesser Hyrule. Next up, in Breath of the Wild, we have indiscriminate attack and excessive destruction of property during the Great Calamity. In the past of Tears of the Kingdom, we have Perfidy when he disguised himself as Zelda to kill Sonia, as well as indiscriminate attack when he had his monsters attack Hyrule. Then, in the present of Tears of the Kingdom, we have the Rito regional phenomenon, which falls under indiscriminate attack as well as hostile use of environmental modification. Now, rules concerning this aren't very well defined or elaborated on due to limited usage in the real world. The only real documented case of it was during the Vietnam War, where the United States military attempted to varying degrees of success to increase the rainfall in particular areas to give them an advantage. Now, like I said, the laws concerning this and even the rules on what is considered it aren't well defined. But I'm going to count it as a war crime, especially since we're not talking about a 15% increase in rain here. We're talking about unrelenting, potentially city-destroying blizzards. Then we have the Gerudo regional phenomenon, which likewise is indiscriminate attack and weather manipulation. At first, I was also going to consider it desecration of the dead, because the Gibdo in previous games have been mummies or skeleton-like creatures. But unlike the depictions in previous games, the Gibdo in Tears of the Kingdom seem to be more insectoid-like rather than mummies or skeletons or anything like that. Meaning it's not actual desecration of the dead. Then there's the Zora regional phenomenon, which falls under indiscriminate attack as well as illegal use of poison. Then we have when Ganon created an illusion of Zelda to lure Link into a trap in Hyrule Castle, which would be considered perfidy. And finally, for Tears of the Kingdom, we have poisoning the Great Deku Tree and attacking civilians. Next up, in Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventure, the original Legend of Zelda, and A Link to the Past, Ganon uses various undead minions. Now this would be considered desecration of the dead. Finally, in Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventure, and A Link to the Past, Ganon utilizes various traps, which are banned by the Geneva Conventions and is a war crime. Totaling this up, Ganon has committed at least 35 war crimes across the Legend of Zelda series, which can carry the death penalty, and since these are all either very major war crimes or extreme examples of each crime, I am giving him 35 death penalties. Finally, totaling up all of the crimes Ganon has committed across the Legend of Zelda series, he is looking at a total of 48 death penalties, 12 life sentences, 946 years in jail, and $131.5 thousand in fines. Next up, we have the second most reoccurring villain in the Zelda series, despite only appearing in 3 games, Vati. First off, we have kidnapping, again. Vati kidnapped Zelda in the Minish Cap and Four Swords, but he also is said to have returned at some point between Minish Cap and Four Swords and kidnapped more people. Now, we aren't given a number, so I'm just going to count this as one charge. So he's guilty of 3 accounts of kidnapping, meaning, as we've established, he is looking at 30 years in jail. Next, we have grand larceny. He has committed this twice, stealing both the Mage's Cap and the Light Force in the Minish Cap, meaning he's looking at 16 years in prison. Next up, we have assault with a deadly weapon. Vati has committed this 10 times. In the Minish Cap, he assaults the guards, protecting the Picori Blade. He attacks Zelda, turning her to stone, which I am counting as assault with a deadly weapon. And he attacks Link twice during both of his boss fights. In Four Swords, he attacks Link in both the intro and in his boss fight, so that's 2 more accounts. And yes, even though Link is split into 4 separate parts, I'm counting him as one person, meaning it is 1 charge of assault. Finally, in Four Swords Adventure, he attacks Link during his boss fight again, totaling up to 10 accounts of assault. And meaning Vati is looking at 100 years in jail, because as we've established, assault with a deadly weapon carries an average sentence of 10 years in the United States. Next up, we have attempted murder. Now, out of those 10 instances of assault, in only 5 of them did he blatantly try to kill someone. And those are his 4 boss fights with Link across the series, when he turns out of the stone. Because even though she does get turned back, if Link hadn't done anything, he probably would have just left her a stone, so I'm counting that as attempted murder. Meaning, Vaati is guilty of 5 instances of attempted murder. Meaning he's looking at 50 years in jail.
Next up, we have destruction of property, when he destroyed the Bakoi blade, giving him another 6 years and $6,500 in fines.
Next up, we have perjury, when he impersonated the King of Hyrule, which, as we established, is a 5-year sentence.
Next up, we have terror. Oh great, not this again. Ignoring the increasing number of watch lists I am on, Vaati has committed this once, turning all the people around Hyrule Castle into stone at the end of Minish Cap. That is going to be a death sentence.
In total, Vaati is looking at 1 death sentence and 207 years in jail. Next up, let's move over to the Metroid series to talk about Ridley. And oh, where do I even begin with him? Yeah, Ridley is possibly the most evil character Nintendo has ever created. And 2 entries ago, we were talking about a character who is essentially the spawn of their universe's Saiyan. Okay, let's start off with the obvious one. Now, despite being a pirate, Ridley has only committed 2 instances of theft. First, when he stole from the mining colony Samus grew up on, and later stealing the last Metroid from a Federation laboratory, meaning Ridley is looking at 16 years in jail for piracy and theft. Next up, we have assault. Ridley has committed this a lot, attacking Samus twice in the prequel comics, once in the original Metroid/Zero mission, once in Samus Returns,
Twice in
Super Metroid, twice in Metroid Prime, twice in Metroid Prime 3,
totaling to 10 charges of assault, meaning Ridley is looking at 100 years in jail.
Now, I'm not counting anything Ridley did in Other M, since that version of Ridley is actually a clone of the original Ridley, and thus is not the same person.
Also, I don't want to have to acknowledge Other M exists longer than I have to. Next up, we have attempted murder. Now, every single instance of assault Ridley has committed was with intent to kill, so that's another 10 charges of attempted murder, meaning Ridley's looking at another 100 years in jail. Next up, we have murder. Now, shockingly, there are only 3 instances of Ridley directly killing someone in the Metroid series. First, there's the obvious one of Samus' mother in the prequel comics, and then there's the scientists that Ridley kills before the events of Super Metroid in order to obtain the baby Metroid. Now, we don't actually know how many people were on this station, but in this shot from the opening, we can count at least 5. So we know Ridley killed at least 5 people. He probably killed more, but we don't see any more bodies or any more people on in any shots. So we're just going to give him the 5. And finally, he kills the Chozo Grey Voice in the prequel manga. In total, Ridley is guilty of 7 accounts of murder and is thus looking at 7 life sentences. Next up, we have animal cruelty. Now, the Space Pirate's actions towards Metroids in the original Metroid and in Super Metroid could be considered animal cruelty, and in severe cases, animal cruelty can have a average sentence of 6 years in jail, 2 years parole, and $10,000 in fines. Meaning Ridley is looking at 12 years in jail, 4 years parole, and $20,000 in fines for animal cruelty.
Next up, we have terrorism. Yay, again. Woo. Getting put on government watch lists. Yay.
Ridley's actions and plans in the original Metroid/Zero mission, Metroid Prime 3, Super Metroid, and 2 chapters of the prequel comics could all be considered terrorism. Meaning Ridley is guilty of 6 accounts of terrorism and is looking at 6 death penalties.
Next up, we have war crimes. And wow, there are a lot. First off, in the prequel manga, we have his raid on the mining colony, which would be considered an indiscriminate attack, plunder, as well as arguably genocide/mass murder, since Ridley specifically tells his forces to focus on killing the civilians before securing the fuel, and they left no survivors.
Okay, well, 1 survivor, but the point still stands.
Yeah, this is the type of person we're dealing with here. Then, he ate the corpses of his human victims in order to heal from the near-fatal wounds he suffered from his ship crashing on top of him. So that's desecration of the dead.
Then he attacked the Chozo out of nowhere, which would be considered an indiscriminate attack.
And we have his actions in Metroid / Zero Mission, which falls under attempted indiscriminate attack, biological warfare, and attempted genocide. Since the end goal was used in Metroids to wipe out entire planets. Then, in Super Metroid, he tries to do the exact same thing, so add another instance of all of those crimes. Then, in Metroid Prime, we have more biological warfare and sentient life experimentation. And in Metroid Prime 3, we have even more sentient life experimentation and biological warfare.
In total, Ridley has committed 15 war crimes and is thus looking at 15 death sentences. In total, Ridley is looking at 21 death penalties, 7 life sentences, 208 years in jail, 4 years parole, and $20,000 in fines.
And on that note, I am going to end the video there. There are a few other characters I wanted to do in this video, particularly Mother Brain and the Pokemon villains, but this video is already half an hour long, and if I go much longer, it's going to be a feature film. So I might do another one of these. Like I said, I also want to maybe do this one day with non-Nintendo characters, particularly GLaDOS and Cave Johnson from the Portal games. So if you want to see another video like this, like, subscribe, share this video with a friend. This video took a very long time to make. I'm going to be honest, a bit longer than it probably should have. So I would really appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, share, and all that stuff.